The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet street as children began their daily walk to Oakwood Elementary School. At exactly 7:30 in the morning, the same figure appeared on the old wooden bench across from the school entrance. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard that showed signs of careful maintenance despite his obvious struggles. His green military jacket, though faded and worn at the edges, was always clean and properly buttoned. The jacket bore no visible name tags or unit patches, but the way he wore it suggested years of military discipline. Principal Sarah Martinez first noticed him on a crisp Monday morning 3 weeks ago. She had arrived early to prepare for parent-teacher conferences when she spotted the man settling onto the bench with a worn leather backpack beside him. At first glance, she assumed he was waiting for someone, or perhaps taking a rest during a long walk. The bench had been there for decades, placed by the city for bus riders and weary pedestrians. Many people used it throughout the day, so one more person seemed perfectly normal. But as the days passed, Sarah began to realize this was not a casual stop. Every single morning, without fail, the man appeared at the same time and remained in the same spot. He would sit with perfect posture, his back straight and shoulders squared in a way that spoke of military training. His hands, weathered and calloused, would rest calmly on his knees as he watched the steady stream of children making their way to school. The children themselves seemed to notice him too. At first they walked past with the usual indifference that kids show to adults they do not know. But gradually, some of the braver ones began to wave as they passed. The man would always respond with a gentle smile and a small wave back. His face would light up in those moments, transforming from the serious expression he usually wore to something much warmer and kinder. The interaction was brief but genuine, and it happened every single day. Ms. Jennifer Cole, who taught 3rd grade and had been at Oakwood for 12 years, was among the first teachers to really take notice of the daily visitor. She arrived at school each morning at 7:45, just 15 minutes after the man had taken his position. From her classroom window on the 2nd floor, she had a clear view of the bench and could observe him throughout the early morning hours. What struck her most was his stillness. In a world where everyone seemed to be rushing somewhere, he sat with remarkable patience and calm. Jennifer began to study his routine more carefully. He would arrive carrying his backpack and a small paper bag that appeared to contain his breakfast. He never ate on the bench itself, but would wait until the morning rush of students had passed before taking out what looked like a simple sandwich or piece of fruit. His movements were deliberate and careful, never wasteful or hurried. Eating, he would pull out a small notebook and begin writing in it. With a pencil that he kept in his jacket pocket, the notebook became a source of growing curiosity for Jennifer. From her window, she could see him writing steadily, occasionally looking up at the school building or the playground area before returning to his work. His concentration was intense, as if he were documenting something important. Sometimes he would stand up and walk a few steps in one direction or another, always staying on the public sidewalk, never crossing onto school property. During these brief walks, he would look at different parts of the school building with what seemed like professional interest. Other teachers began to notice him as well. Mrs. Patricia Williams, who taught kindergarten and had been at the school for over 20 years, mentioned him during a faculty meeting. She had observed him from the playground during recess duty and noted that he would often stand up and move closer to the fence during these times. His attention seemed focused on the children playing, but not in a way that felt threatening. Instead, he appeared to be watching over them, like a guardian keeping an eye on their safety. The school security guard, Tom Williams, no relation to Patricia, despite sharing a last name, had approached the man twice during his 3-week presence. The first encounter happened during the 2nd week, when Tom felt it was his duty to check on anyone who spent extended time near the school. The conversation had been brief and polite. The man explained that he was on public property and meant no harm to anyone. His voice was soft but clear, with the kind of respectful tone that suggested military service. Tom noticed immediately that the man kept eye contact and answered questions directly, without evasion or nervousness. During their second conversation, Tom paid closer attention to details about the man. His shoes were old and had small holes. near the toes, but they were clean and tied properly. His jeans were faded, but not dirty. Most notably, despite the obvious signs that he was struggling financially, he maintained his personal hygiene and dignity. His hair was combed, his face was clean-shaven, except for the neat beard, and his clothes were free of stains or odors. This was not someone who had given up on himself, rather someone facing difficult circumstances while trying to maintain his standards. The man never asked for money, never approached parents or children directly, and never caused any kind of disturbance. He simply sat, watched, and wrote in his notebook. His presence became as regular as the school bell or the crossing guard. Parents began to recognize him as part of the daily landscape around Oakwood Elementary. Some wondered about his story, but most were too busy with their own morning routines to give him much thought. During colder mornings, the man would pull a knit cap from his backpack and wear it low over his ears. On rainy days, he would take shelter under the small overhang of the bus stop, but he would return to his bench as soon as the weather cleared. His dedication to maintaining his daily routine was remarkable and spoke to a sense of purpose that was not immediately clear to the observers at the school. As the third week came to an end, the man had become such a fixture that his absence would have been noticed immediately. Children looked for his morning wave. Teachers glanced out their windows to see him at his post. Even parents who drove their children to school began to expect to see the figure on the bench. He had woven himself into the daily rhythm of Oakwood Elementary without anyone really understanding why he was there or what he was writing in. That notebook that seemed so important to him, the mystery of the man on the bench, was about to deepen, and the answers would surprise everyone who had been watching him. His presence was not random, and his careful attention to the school was driven by something much more profound than simple curiosity. The truth about why he came every day, what he was writing, and who he really was, would soon be revealed in ways that would touch every heart in the Oakwood Elementary community. Ms. Jennifer Cole could not shake the feeling that there was something special about the man on the bench. As a teacher with 12 years of experience, she had developed strong instincts about people, especially when it came to those who spent time around children. Everything about this man suggested kindness and gentleness. But she was naturally curious about anyone who made such a point of being near their school every single day. On a particularly cold Thursday morning, Jennifer made a decision that would change everything. She stopped at the coffee shop on her way to work and bought an extra cup of coffee along with her usual morning drink. The steam rose from the hot liquid as she walked the final 2 blocks to school, and she could see the man already in his familiar position on the bench. His breath was visible in the cold air. She noticed that he was not wearing gloves despite the freezing temperature. Jennifer approached him slowly, not wanting to startle him or make him feel uncomfortable. She offered the coffee with a simple explanation that she had bought too much and wondered if he would like some. The man looked up at her with surprise and gratitude. His eyes were a deep brown color, and they held a warmth that immediately put her at ease. He accepted the coffee with genuine thanks, wrapping his cold hands around the cup as if it were a precious gift. During their brief conversation, Jennifer learned that he was very polite and well-spoken. He did not offer his name, and she did not ask for it, sensing that he valued his privacy. But he thanked her for her kindness and mentioned that he had noticed her arriving at the same time each morning. His observation skills were clearly sharp, and he spoke with the kind of awareness that suggested he paid attention to details that others might miss. Word of Jennifer's coffee gesture spread among the other teachers, and soon several of them began bringing him small kindnesses. Mrs. Patricia Williams brought him a sandwich one day when she had packed an extra lunch. Mr. David Chen, a physical education teacher, offered him a pair of gloves that had been left in the lost and found box for months. Each time the man accepted these gifts with humble gratitude, but he never asked for anything or made the teachers feel obligated to help him. What impressed the teachers most was how he interacted with these small acts of kindness. He never seemed to expect them or take them for granted. Instead, he treated each gesture as a surprise gift that brightened his day. His response to their kindness made them want to help him more, not because he asked for it, but because his appreciation was so genuine and heartfelt. During lunch breaks, when the playground was full of children's laughter and activity, the man would often stand up from his bench and walk closer to the fence that surrounded the school grounds. He never crossed the boundary or tried to interact directly with the children, but he would watch them play with an expression that the teachers found difficult to read. There was joy in his face as he observed their games and heard their happy voices, but there was also a deep sadness that seemed to come from somewhere. It's very personal, Ms. Cole began to watch him more carefully during these playground observation periods. She noticed that his attention was not focused on any particular child, but rather on the overall scene of children being children. When a student fell down during a game, she saw the man take a step forward instinctively, as if he wanted to help, before catching himself and remaining on his side of the fence. When children argued or seemed upset, his face would show concern, and he would watch carefully until the situation resolved itself. The most interesting thing Jennifer observed was how the man seemed to be constantly assessing the school environment. His eyes would move from the playground equipment to the surrounding buildings, from the fence line to the street traffic, from the arrival and dismissal procedures to the way teachers supervised outdoor activities. It was not the casual observation of someone with nothing else to do, rather the focused attention of someone who was looking for something specific. His notebook writing sessions became longer and more detailed as the weeks passed. Jennifer could see him referring to different pages, sometimes flipping back to earlier entries before adding new information. His handwriting appeared neat and organized, suggesting that whatever he was documenting was important enough to him to keep careful records. The pencil he used was worn down to a small stub, and she made a mental note to bring him a new one along with his coffee the next morning, during one particularly busy morning. When parents were dropping off students for a field trip, Jennifer noticed that the man's attention became even more focused than usual. He stood up several times, moving to different positions along the sidewalk to get better views of the organized chaos that surrounded special events at the school. His notebook came out more frequently, and he wrote with what appeared to be some urgency. Whatever he was recording seemed to be related to these busier periods when normal routines were disrupted. The man's physical appearance also told a story that the teachers were beginning to piece together. His military jacket was not just a fashion choice or a convenient warm layer. The way he wore it, maintained it, and carried himself suggested real military service. His posture never relaxed into the slouch that most people adopted when sitting. For long periods, his awareness of his surroundings was constant and professional. Even his choice to position himself where he could observe the entire school environment spoke to training that went beyond civilian experience. Tom Williams, security guard, had begun to develop a grudging respect for the man during their occasional conversations. Tom himself was a veteran, having served in the Navy for 6 years before taking his job at the school. He recognized certain qualities in the bench sitter that spoke to shared experiences of military service. The way the man scanned his environment, his respectful but direct communication style, and his obvious discipline in maintaining his daily routine, all suggested a background that Tom could relate to and understand as the fourth week of the man's daily presence began. The teachers found themselves looking forward to seeing him each morning. His quiet, respectful presence had become a comforting constant in their daily routine. Children continued to wave at him, and his gentle responses had become a small, bright spot in many young lives. Parents had grown accustomed to seeing him and no longer viewed him with suspicion or concern. But the mystery of why he was there remained unsolved. His careful attention to the school, his detailed note-taking, and his obvious military background created questions that none of the staff could answer. The notebook that was so central to his daily routine held secrets that everyone was curious about, but no one felt comfortable asking him to share. The man had earned their respect and trust through weeks of consistent, peaceful behavior, but his true purpose remained hidden. The answers to all these questions were closer than anyone realized, and they would come in a way that would surprise and move everyone who had been watching the mysterious figure on the bench. His story was more complex and touching than any of them had imagined, and when the truth finally emerged, it would change how they saw not only him but also their own community and the power of human kindness to heal wounded hearts. The rain began falling early on Thursday morning, starting as a light drizzle that quickly turned into a steady downpour. By 7:15, the streets around Oakwood Elementary were slicked with water and parents were hurrying their children through the weather toward the safety of the school building. Ms. Jennifer Cole parked her car and made a quick dash for the school entrance. Her coffee and extra supplies clutched tightly against her chest to keep them dry as she reached the school steps. Jennifer turned to look back toward the bench where the man usually sat. Through the sheets of rain, she could see that the bench was empty. This was the first time in 4 weeks that he had not been in his usual position, and she felt a surprising sense of concern. She wondered if he had found shelter somewhere else, or if the weather had finally forced him to break his daily routine. Jennifer went about her morning preparations, but found herself frequently looking out the window toward the empty bench. The rain continued throughout the early morning hours, and she began to worry about where the man might be staying dry. She had grown accustomed to his presence and realized that his daily routine had become more important to her than she had previously understood. Around 10:30, as Jennifer was teaching her third-grade reading lesson, she noticed that the rain had finally stopped. Sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds, and she could see steam rising from the wet pavement outside her classroom window. During her planning period, she decided to take a walk outside to get some fresh air and check if the man had returned to his bench. As she approached the bench area, Jennifer immediately noticed something lying on the wet wooden slats. The rain had stopped, but everything was still soaked from the morning downpour. There, partially hidden under the bench and clearly forgotten in someone's hurry to find shelter, was a small leather notebook. She recognized it immediately as the notebook that the man wrote in every day. Her heart jumped as she realized he must have dropped it when the rain started. Jennifer looked around quickly to see if the man was anywhere nearby, but the area was empty except for a few parents walking past on their way to pick up children for lunch appointments. She knew that the notebook was clearly important to him, given how much time he spent writing in it each day. Her first instinct was to leave it exactly where it was, in case he returned looking for it. But the leather was already water damaged, and more rain was predicted for later in the day. Making a quick decision, Jennifer picked up the notebook and hurried back toward the school building. She planned to keep it safe and dry until she could return it to him the next morning. As she held the small book, she could feel that it was heavy for its size, clearly filled with many pages of writing. The leather cover was worn and soft, suggesting it had been used regularly for a long time. Back in her classroom, Jennifer placed the notebook on her desk and tried to focus on her afternoon lessons. But her curiosity about the contents grew stronger as the hours passed. She kept telling herself that looking inside would be wrong, that everyone deserved privacy, not that she should simply wait to return it without ever opening it. But by the end of the school day, her concern for the man and her natural curiosity as a teacher overcame her hesitation. Jennifer opened the notebook carefully, telling herself that she was only looking for identification information so she could find a way to contact the man and return his property. The first page immediately surprised her. Instead of personal diary entries or random thoughts, she found detailed, organized notes written in neat handwriting. The entries were dated and appeared to be systematic observations rather than casual. Writing as she read further, Jennifer's concern quickly turned to alarm. The pages were filled with detailed notes about the school's security measures, or rather, the lack of them. Entry after entry documented potential safety problems around Oakwood Elementary. Broken fence near playground allows easy access from a residential area. Back gate lock appears loose and could be opened by determined individual. Students cross street during dismissal without adequate supervision from crossing guard. Delivery. Trucks park too close to main entrance during morning hours. Jennifer's hands began to shake as she read page after page of security observations. Her first thought was that they had all been terribly wrong about the man. Perhaps he was not the gentle, harmless person they had believed him to be. Perhaps his daily presence and careful observation of the school had a much darker purpose than any of them had imagined. The detailed nature of his notes suggested someone who was planning something that required extensive knowledge of the school's vulnerabilities. But as she continued reading, Jennifer began to notice something else. In the tone and content of the entries, the man was not documenting weaknesses in order to exploit them. Instead, he was identifying problems that needed to be fixed. Each security concern was followed by specific suggestions for improvement. Fence repair needed urgently to prevent unauthorized access. Gate locks should be replaced with heavy-duty security lock. Additional crossing guard or traffic light needed at main intersection. Delivery protocol should require trucks to park in designated area away from student pathways. The realization hit Jennifer like a physical blow. This man was not a threat to their school. He was trying to protect it. Every single entry in his notebook was written from the perspective of someone who wanted to keep the children safe, not someone who wanted to harm them. His detailed observations were the work of someone with security training who had identified genuine problems that the school administration had never noticed or addressed. Jennifer turned to earlier pages in the notebook and found entries that went back several months, long before the man had started his daily routine on the bench. These earlier notes were different, more personal and emotional. Saw school today that looks just like Emma's old school. Same red brick, same playground layout. Brought back so many memories of dropping her off every morning. Children playing. Reminded me of Emma's laugh. Miss that sound more than anything. Want to make sure these kids are safe. Someone should be watching out for them. The references to Emma appeared throughout the earlier entries, always with deep emotion and obvious pain. Emma would be starting 4th grade now. Wonder if she still likes to read chapter books. Saw a little girl with pigtails just like Emma. Used to wear, had to walk away before I started crying. Dream about Emma every night. Wake up thinking I need to get her ready for school, then remember she's not here anymore. As Jennifer read these more personal entries, tears began forming. In her eyes, this was not the notebook of someone planning to hurt children. This was the heartbroken writing of someone who had lost a child and was trying to find a way to cope with that loss by protecting other children. His daily presence at the school was not about surveillance for harmful purposes. It was about making sure that other parents did not have to experience whatever tragedy had separated him from his daughter Emma. The later entries, written during his weeks of sitting on the bench, showed how his grief had transformed into a sense of purpose. Security problems at this school are serious. Someone needs to do something. These teachers work so hard to keep kids safe, but they don't see all the risks. Maybe if I document everything carefully, I can find a way to help without scaring. Anyone don't know how to approach them. They probably think I'm just a homeless, crazy person. Jennifer realized that his careful documentation was not the work of someone with harmful intentions, but rather the dedicated effort of someone who had professional knowledge about security and genuine concern for children's safety. His military background, which they had all suspected, was being used to identify and solve problems, not create them. I'd been sitting on that bench every day, not to plan something terrible, but to serve as an unofficial guardian watching over children who reminded him of the daughter he could no longer protect. The final entries in the notebook revealed his internal struggle about how to share his concerns with the school. Want to tell them about the problems I found, but how do I explain why I've been watching so carefully? They've been kind to me with coffee and food, but will they listen to security advice from a homeless veteran? Maybe I should just leave the notebook somewhere they'll find it. Let them decide if the information is useful. Jennifer closed the notebook with trembling hands, her heart breaking for the man who had been trying so hard to help them while suffering his own deep personal pain. She had misjudged his intentions completely, and now she understood that his presence at their school was not a threat, but a gift. He had been protecting their children in the only way he knew how, using his professional skills to identify dangers while dealing with his own grief and loss. The notebook had revealed the true story of the man on the bench, and Jennifer knew that she had to find a way to help him share his important information with the school administration. But more than that, she realized that the Oakwood Elementary community had a chance to help heal a broken heart while making their school safer. For all the children who attended there, the discovery of the notebook was about to change everything for everyone involved. The next morning arrived with clear skies and crisp air that made everything seem fresh and new. Ms. Jennifer Cole arrived at school 30 minutes early, carrying the leather notebook carefully in her bag, along with 2 cups of coffee and a sense of nervous anticipation. She had spent most of the previous evening thinking about what she had learned from reading the man's notes, and she knew that today's conversation would be different from all their previous brief exchanges. At exactly 7:30, the man appeared. At his usual spot on the bench, Jennifer could see the relief on his face when he spotted his familiar surroundings. But she also noticed him looking around with obvious concern. His routine had been broken by yesterday's rain, and she could tell that he was searching for something. As she approached him with the 2 cups of coffee, she could see his eyes scanning the ground around the bench area. Jennifer greeted him with her usual friendly smile and offered him the coffee, but this time she also pulled the leather notebook from her bag. The man's face immediately changed when he saw it. Relief, gratitude, and embarrassment all crossed his features in quick succession. He accepted the notebook with hands that shook slightly, holding it against his chest, as if it were something precious that he had thought was lost forever. He began to thank her repeatedly, his voice thick with emotion as he explained how worried he had been about losing the notebook. Jennifer sat down on the bench beside him, something she had never done before, and gently told him that she understood the notebook was important to him. She assured him that she had kept it safe and dry, but then she took a deep breath and she admitted that she had looked inside to see if there was any identification information. The man's face went pale. Jennifer could see fear replacing the relief in his eyes. He clearly expected her to be angry or frightened by what she had found. His whole body seemed to tense up as he prepared for accusations or demands that he leave and never return. But instead of anger, Jennifer's voice was filled with compassion as she told him that she understood. He had been trying to help keep the children. Safe tears began to form in the man's eyes as he realized that Jennifer was not going to judge him harshly for his careful observations. For the first time in their month of brief interactions, he began to open up about who he really was and why he had been coming to the school every day. His voice was quiet and sometimes broken with emotion. But his story emerged slowly and completely. His name was Robert Chen. But everyone had always called him Bobby. He was 53 years old and had served in the United States Army for 22 years before retiring with the rank of Sergeant First Class. His military specialty had been military police work, with additional training in base security and force protection. He had served 3 tours of duty overseas, including 2 deployments to Afghanistan and 1 to Iraq, where his job had been to identify security threats and protect military personnel and facilities. Bobby had been married to a woman named Lisa for 15 years, and they had 1 daughter together named Emma. Emma was now 10 years old, the same age as many of the students at Oakwood Elementary. Bobby's voice became especially tender when he talked about Emma, describing her as smart, funny, and loving, with a laugh that could make anyone smile, even on their worst day. She had been the center of his world, and he had been a devoted father who never missed a school play, soccer game, or parent-teacher conference. The problems began when Bobby returned from his final deployment 18 months ago. Like many veterans, he struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder and had difficulty adjusting to civilian life after more than 2 decades of military service. The symptoms started small, with occasional nightmares and trouble sleeping, but gradually grew worse. He experienced anxiety attacks, especially in crowded places, and had difficulty concentrating on tasks that had once been easy for him. Bobby tried to get help through the Veterans Administration, but the wait times for mental health services were long. He found it difficult to talk about his experiences with therapists who had never served in the military. He began to withdraw from social activities and had trouble maintaining the job he had taken with a private security company. His marriage began to suffer as he became more isolated and struggled with depression that he did not know how to address. The turning point came 8 months ago when Bobby lost his job due to his inability to focus and his increasing absences related to his mental health struggles. Without steady income, he and Lisa began to have serious financial problems. They fell behind on their rent and utility bills, and the stress of their situation made Bobby's mental health symptoms even worse. Lisa, who had been patient and supportive for many months, finally reached the point where she felt she had to choose between staying with Bobby and providing stability for Emma. The divorce and custody proceedings were devastating for Bobby. Because of his mental health issues and his inability to provide a stable home, the court awarded primary custody of Emma to Lisa. Bobby was granted supervised visitation rights, but only if he could demonstrate that he was receiving treatment for his mental health problems and had stable housing. The loss of daily contact with his daughter sent Bobby into a deeper depression than he had ever experienced. Unable to afford rent on his own and struggling with the bureaucracy of Veterans Administration services, Bobby ended up living in his car. It was a 15-year-old Honda that had been his reliable transportation during his marriage. But it was never meant to be someone's home. He parked in different locations each night, trying to stay safe and avoid attracting attention from police or property owners who might make him move along. Bobby's daily routine became centered around visiting places that reminded him of the life he had lost. He would drive past Emma's school during drop-off and pickup times, hoping to catch a glimpse of her but staying far enough away to avoid violating the custody agreement. He would sit in parks where he had once played with her and walk through neighborhoods where families lived the kind of life he had once had. 3 months ago, Bobby discovered Oakwood Elementary during one of his aimless drives through residential areas. The school's red brick building and traditional playground layout reminded him strongly of Emma's school in the town where he used to live with his family. The sight of children playing and learning brought back memories of his own daughter's school experiences. But it also awakened something in him that had been dormant since his life fell apart. Bobby realized that his military training and security and force protection had not disappeared, even though everything else in his life had changed. As he observed Oakwood Elementary from his car during that first visit, his professional eye automatically began to identify security vulnerabilities that could put the children at risk. The broken fence, the inadequate supervision during certain times, the poor traffic control during busy periods. All of these problems were immediately obvious to someone with his background and training. At first, Bobby thought about simply reporting his observations to the school administration, but he knew that his appearance and circumstances would make it unlikely that anyone would take him seriously, would listen to security advice from a homeless veteran living in his car. He decided instead to document everything carefully, thinking that perhaps he could find a way to share the information anonymously once. He had gathered enough details to be helpful. The daily routine of sitting on the bench and observing the school gave Bobby a sense of purpose that he had not felt since losing his job and his family. He was using his professional skills to protect children, even if those children did not know he existed. The work reminded him of his military service, when his vigilance and attention to detail had kept other people safe. It also reminded him of his role as Emma's father, when protecting her had been the most important job in his life. Bobby's voice broke as he explained to Jennifer that watching the children at Oakwood Elementary was both painful and healing for him. Every day he saw reminders of Emma in the faces and voices of the students. Their laughter brought back memories of her joy, but it also emphasized how much he missed her daily presence in his life. The children's safety became a way for him to continue being a protector and a father, even though he could no longer protect and care for his own child. As Bobby finished telling his story, both he and Jennifer were wiping tears from their eyes. The morning sun had grown stronger, and children were beginning to arrive for another day of school. Jennifer realized that she was sitting beside a man whose heart had been broken by circumstances beyond his control, but who had found a way to transform his pain into service for others. His daily presence at their school was not just about security observations. It was about love, loss, and the human need to find meaning and purpose, even in the darkest times. Miss Jennifer Cole spent the rest of that Friday in a state of emotional turmoil, her mind racing with thoughts about Bobby's story and what she should do with the information he had shared. She moved through her teaching duties automatically, but her heart and attention were focused on the man who was still sitting on the bench outside, continuing his silent vigil over the school he had grown to care about so deeply. During her lunch break, Jennifer made a decision that would change everything for Bobby and for Oakwood Elementary. She walked directly to Principal Sarah Martinez's office and asked for an urgent private meeting. Sarah could see the emotion on Jennifer's face and immediately cleared her schedule to listen to what her experienced teacher had to say. Jennifer began by explaining the morning's conversation with Bobby, but quickly realized that she needed to provide more context about the notebook and what she had discovered about his true intentions. She spoke carefully and thoroughly, making sure that Sarah understood that Bobby was not a threat to their school, but rather someone who had been trying to protect it using his professional military expertise. Principal Martinez listened with growing amazement as Jennifer described the detailed security observations in Bobby's notebook. As the administrator responsible for student safety, Sarah was both impressed and concerned that so many potential problems had been identified by someone outside their school system. She asked Jennifer to bring the notebook to her office so she could review the security recommendations herself. That afternoon, while Bobby continued his usual routine outside, Principal Martinez spent 2 hours reading through every page of his notebook. She was struck by the professional quality of his observations and the genuine concern for student safety that was evident in every entry. His recommendations were specific, practical, and clearly based on extensive training and experience in security matters. Sarah realized that Bobby's insights could be invaluable for improving safety at Oakwood Elementary, but she also understood that the situation required careful handling. She was moved by his personal story as Jennifer had related it, and she wanted to find a way to help him while also benefiting from his expertise. She decided to call an emergency meeting with her assistant principal and the school district's safety coordinator for the following Monday over the weekend. Word of Bobby's situation began to spread among the Oakwood Elementary staff. Jennifer had asked Principal Martinez for permission to share the story with a few other teachers who had been showing kindness to Bobby, and their reaction was immediate and heartfelt. Mrs. Patricia Williams, the kindergarten teacher, was moved to tears when she learned about Emma and understood why Bobby's face always looked so sad when he watched the children playing. Mr. David Chen, the physical education teacher, was particularly affected by Bobby's military service and his current struggles. As someone whose own father had served in Vietnam and faced similar challenges upon returning home, David understood the unique difficulties that veterans faced when trying to readjust to civilian life. He immediately began thinking about ways that the school community could provide practical support. Tom Williams, the security guard, felt a special connection to Bobby's story because of their shared military background. When he learned about Bobby's extensive training in security and force protection, Tom realized that they had missed an opportunity to benefit from his expertise. Tom had been doing his best to keep the schools safe, but he recognized that Bobby's specialized training could help identify problems that he had never noticed. On Monday morning, Principal Martinez arrived at school early and asked Jennifer to invite Bobby to meet with her in her office. Jennifer approached this request with some nervousness, knowing that Bobby might be fearful about being called to meet with the principal. She assured him that the meeting was friendly and that Principal Martinez wanted to discuss his security observations rather than ask him to leave. Bobby's hand shook slightly as he followed Jennifer into the school building for the first time since he had begun his daily routine. His military training told him to stand straight and show respect, but his personal circumstances made him feel ashamed and out of place in the clean, professional environment of the school administration offices. Principal Martinez greeted Bobby with warmth and genuine respect, immediately putting him at ease by thanking him for his military service and expressing appreciation for his concern about student safety. She had prepared for this meeting by reviewing his notebook thoroughly, and she began the conversation by acknowledging the quality and importance of his security observations. Bobby was surprised when Principal Martinez began asking detailed questions about his recommendations rather than questioning his right to be observing the school. She wanted to understand his reasoning behind each suggestion and learn more about his professional background in security work. For the first time in months, Bobby felt valued for his knowledge and experience rather than judged for his current circumstances. The meeting lasted for over an hour, during which Bobby explained his military training in force protection and described how he had identified the various security vulnerabilities around Oakwood Elementary. Principal Martinez took detailed notes and asked intelligent questions that showed she was taking his recommendations seriously. She was particularly concerned about the traffic safety issues he had identified and the problems with perimeter security that could allow unauthorized access to the school grounds. As the meeting progressed, Bobby began to relax and speak more confidently about the security improvements he believed were necessary. His professional demeanor emerged as he discussed technical aspects of school safety, and Principal Martinez could see the competent, dedicated soldier he had once been beneath the struggles he was currently facing. She realized that his expertise could be incredibly valuable for their school district, which had been looking for ways to improve security without having the budget for expensive consultants. Near the end of their conversation, Principal Martinez made a proposal that shocked Bobby completely. She offered him a position as a part-time security consultant for Oakwood Elementary, starting with a small salary that would allow him to begin getting back on his feet financially. The job would involve conducting a comprehensive security assessment of the school, implementing his recommended improvements, and providing ongoing consultation about safety procedures. Bobby stared at Principal Martinez in disbelief, unable to process that someone was offering him employment. It's based on the very observations that he had worried might be seen as threatening or inappropriate. He asked if she was serious, and when. She assured him that the offer was genuine. Tears began flowing down his face. For the first time since losing his job and his family, someone was recognizing his value and giving him a chance to rebuild his life. The practical details of the job offer were modest, but significant for someone in Bobby's situation. The part-time position would provide enough income for him to rent a small apartment and begin the process of establishing stable housing. More importantly, it would give him official status as a school employee, which would help him in his efforts to regain visitation rights with Emma and demonstrate to the family court that he was making progress in rebuilding his life. Principal Martinez also connected Bobby with the school district's Employee Assistance Program, which could help him access mental health services specifically designed for veterans. She understood that his success in the job would depend partly on his ability to address the underlying issues that had contributed to his current difficulties. She wanted to make sure he had the support he needed to succeed. Word of Bobby's hiring spread quickly through the Oakwood Elementary community. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Teachers who had been showing him small kindnesses were thrilled to learn that their instincts about his good character had been correct. Parents who had grown accustomed to seeing him on the bench were impressed to discover that he had been working to keep their children safer without any expectation of recognition or reward. The local newspaper picked up the story and published an article about the homeless veteran who had been hired as a security consultant after spending weeks documenting safety concerns at a local elementary school. The article portrayed Bobby as a dedicated professional who had found a way to serve his community even while facing personal challenges. And it generated an outpouring of support from other veterans and community members who wanted to help him succeed in his new position. Local businesses began reaching out to offer assistance with Bobby's transition from homelessness to stable housing. A furniture store donated basic furniture for his apartment. A clothing store provided him with professional attire appropriate for his new job. The local Veterans of Foreign Wars chapter invited him to join their organization and offered additional support services specifically designed to help veterans readjust to civilian employment. Most significantly, the positive changes in Bobby's circumstances began to have an impact on his relationship with his daughter, Emma. When his ex-wife Lisa learned about his new job in stable housing through the newspaper article, she agreed to allow him to have unsupervised visits with Emma for the first time since their divorce. The family court was impressed by his progress and agreed to review his custody arrangement with the possibility of expanding his parental rights. Emma's first visit to Bobby's new apartment was emotional for both of them. She was proud of her father for finding work that used his military skills to help keep children safe, and she was excited to see him in circumstances that felt more normal and stable. Bobby showed her his security consultant badge and explained how he was working to make schools safer for kids like her, which made Emma feel special and important. The transformation in Bobby's life seemed almost miraculous to those who had watched his daily routine on the bench outside Oakwood Elementary. In the space of just a few weeks, he had gone from being a homeless veteran struggling with depression and loss to being a valued employee with stable housing and renewed contact with his daughter. But the change had been possible only because of the kindness and wisdom of people like Jennifer Cole and Sarah Martinez, who had looked beyond his circumstances to see his true character and potential. Bobby's first official day as security consultant was marked by a small ceremony where Principal Martinez introduced him to the entire school staff and presented him with his employee identification badge. The teachers applauded enthusiastically, and several of them told him privately how happy they were that he had found a way to turn his difficult circumstances into an opportunity to help others. Bobby wore his military jacket that day, but now it was paired with dress pants and a button-down shirt that reflected his new professional status. 6 months after Bobby Chen first sat down on the bench across from Oakwood Elementary School, his life had transformed in ways that seemed impossible during those dark days. When he was living in his car and struggling with depression and loss, the small apartment he now called home was modest, but clean and comfortable, filled with furniture donated by community members and decorated with drawings that Emma had made during her weekend visits with him. Every morning at 7:15, Bobby still arrived at Oakwood Elementary, the same time he had when he was homeless and watching the school from across the street. But now he walked through the front doors as a valued employee, wearing his security consultant badge with pride and carrying a new notebook filled with implementation plans for the safety improvements he had recommended. His official security assessment had identified 37 different areas where Oakwood Elementary could improve student safety, ranging from simple fixes like repairing the broken fence to more complex projects like redesigning the traffic flow during drop-off and pickup times. The school district had been so impressed with the quality and thoroughness of Discading's work that they had expanded his contract to include other schools in their system. Bobby's success at Oakwood Elementary had attracted attention from school districts throughout the region, and he was beginning to develop a reputation as an expert in educational facility security. His combination of military training, genuine concern for children's safety, and personal understanding of the challenges that schools faced made him uniquely qualified for this specialized field of work. The income from his consulting work had allowed Bobby to move beyond just meeting his basic needs for housing and food. He had been able to purchase reliable transportation, professional clothing, and even some small luxuries that reminded him of the life he had shared with his family. Most importantly, he had been able to demonstrate to the family court that he was capable of providing a stable environment for Emma. The custody arrangement with his ex-wife Lisa had evolved gradually as Bobby proved his reliability and emotional stability. What had started as supervised visits had progressed to weekend stays, and now Emma spent 3 nights each week at her father's apartment. Their relationship had grown stronger than it had ever been, built on a foundation of honesty about the struggles they had both faced and mutual respect for the progress they had both made. Emma, now 11 years old, had become one of Bobby's biggest supporters, and was incredibly proud of the work he was doing to keep schools safe. She would often help him organize his security reports, and had even suggested some improvements based on her perspective as a student. Her insights had proven valuable, and Bobby had begun to include student input as a regular part of his security assessments. The relationship between Bobby and his ex-wife Lisa had also improved significantly as they learned to co-parent effectively and support each other in raising Emma. Lisa had remarried and was expecting another child, but she had made it clear that she wanted Emma to maintain a strong relationship with her father. The adults had learned to communicate respectfully about Emma's needs and to celebrate her successes together. At Oakwood Elementary, Bobby had become much more than just a security consultant. He had developed relationships with teachers and staff members that went beyond his professional duties. He volunteered to help with school events, assisted with after-school programs, and had even begun mentoring other veterans who were struggling with the transition to civilian life. Ms. Jennifer Cole, who had been the first person to show him kindness and who had discovered the truth about his intentions, had become one of his closest friends at the school. She often joked that she had gotten much more than she bargained for when she decided to share her extra cup of coffee with the mysterious man on the bench. Their friendship had taught both of them about the importance of looking beyond appearances and giving people the benefit of the doubt. Principal Sarah Martinez had become a strong advocate for Bobby's work and had written letters of recommendation. That helped him expand his consulting business to other school districts. She frequently spoke at educational conferences about the value of community, partnerships, and the importance of recognizing that help and expertise can come from unexpected sources. Bobby's story had become an inspiration for other administrators who were looking for innovative ways to improve school safety. Tom Williams, the security guard who had first approached Bobby with suspicion but had later recognized their shared military background, had become both a colleague and a friend. They worked together to implement security procedures at Oakwood Elementary and had developed a comprehensive training program for school staff about emergency responses and safety protocols. The bench across from Oakwood Elementary still sat in the same spot where Bobby had spent so many hours watching and documenting, but now it bore a small memorial plaque that the community had installed to honor his service and dedication. The plaque read simply, "In recognition of those who serve and protect in uniform and out of uniform." It had become a reminder to everyone who passed by that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places. Bobby's story had been featured in several military and veteran publications as an example of how former service members could use their skills to benefit their communities and civilian careers. He had been invited to speak at veteran service organizations and had become an advocate for better mental health services and employment assistance for military personnel transitioning to civilian life. The notebook that had once contained his lonely observations about school security problems was now filled with implementation schedules, budget proposals, and thank you notes from students, teachers, and parents who appreciated his work. He still wrote in it every day, but now his entries reflected hope and purpose rather than grief and desperation. On the anniversary of his first day sitting on the bench, Bobby organized a special assembly at Oakwood Elementary where he spoke to the students about the importance of helping others and looking out for people who might be struggling. He told them that sometimes the people who seem different or who don't fit in are actually trying their hardest to help and contribute to their community. Emma attended that assembly and sat in the front row, beaming with pride as her father spoke about overcoming challenges and finding ways to serve others, even during difficult times. After his presentation, she stood up and hugged him in front of the entire school, and there was not a dry eye in the auditorium. The students gave Bobby a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. As Bobby looked out at the faces of the children and teachers who had become his extended family, he thought about how different his life has become since that first morning when he had sat on the bench feeling hopeless and alone. He had learned that sometimes the darkest periods in life can lead to the most meaningful opportunities for service and connection with others. The man who had once sat silently on a bench, was grieving for his lost family and struggling with his own demons, had become a respected professional, a loving father, and a valued member of his community. His story proved that with kindness, understanding, and the willingness to see beyond surface appearances, even the most broken lives can be rebuilt into something beautiful and meaningful. Every morning when Bobby arrived at Oakwood Elementary for work, he would glance at the bench where his journey had begun and feel grateful for the series of events that had brought him from despair to hope. The children who waved at him now knew his name and his story, and their smiles reminded him every day that he had found his way home to the life he was meant to live.